53. It's the pleasure of the House that Bill number 53 be now read a second time. Minister of Service, New Brunswick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on the second reading of an act respecting the New Brunswick Housing Corporation. Mr. Speaker, last October, I was appointed the Minister responsible for housing with a mandate to monitor and support all housing initiatives across government and ensure alignment for the successful and timely completion of housing-related projects throughout our province. Since my appointment, I have held many discussions and consultations with my federal and provincial colleagues, local governments, community groups, and the private sector. This includes the housing workshop held virtually in February with over 150 participants and the follow-up housing summit on May 2nd that provided an opportunity for participants to present and discuss their creative ideas on how we could work together to improve housing for our residents. Through these meetings and discussions, I have a better understanding of New Brunswick's housing landscape and the need for a unified approach to address our housing challenges. As you know, Mr. Speaker, finding appropriate and effective solutions to New Brunswick's housing challenges is complex. It requires the attention of a dedicated entity with the expertise and focus to bring all housing measures together under one lens to identify existing resources, gaps, and opportunities for improvement. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to say much of this work has already begun. Earlier this year, I announced the first steps in renewing the New Brunswick Housing Corporation as a separate Part 1 Crown Corporation, staffed with a board of directors, senior leaders, and a team of employees dedicated to helping ensure New Brunswickers are safely and securely housed. This includes the transfer of roughly 190 employees from social development, transportation and infrastructure, and Service New Brunswick. The new corporation will have the expertise and responsibility of overseeing provincial housing initiatives, facilities, strategy, and residential tenancy services. To oversee the creation of the renewed corporation structure and drafting of legislative requirements, an interim president and chief executive officer was appointed on March 30th, 2023. Mr. Speaker, in order to establish the New Brunswick Housing Corporation, amendments are required to the New Brunswick Housing Act, the general regulation under the Accountability and Continuous Improvement Act, and the Residential Tenancies Act and its regulations. The amendments we are proposing to the New Brunswick Housing Act will allow us to move the responsibility of the New Brunswick Housing Corporation from the Minister of Social Development to the Minister responsible for housing. It will allow us to change the composition of the board of directors from 10 to up to 10 persons. The new board will include the minister, president, and up to 8 members. Set quorum to the majority of board members as opposed to the 5 members. It also authorized the board of directors to appoint the president on a go-forward basis and require that salaries and expenses for the staff to be set by law rather than the lieutenant governor in council by bylaw. Authorize the staff of the corporation, the Department of Social Development, to share personal information on client files where necessary, and it will allow surplus land and property to be transferred between the corporation and a government department or other entity such as a municipality, which is directly related to our discussion this morning. Next, Mr. Speaker, our proposed amendments to the general regulation under the Accountability and Continuous Improvement Act will allow us to move the corporation from Category 2, which is bound by annual reports, to a Category 1, which is bound by mandate letters, business plans, and annual reports. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, our proposed amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act will allow us to move the responsibility for the administration of the Act from Service New Brunswick to the New Brunswick Housing Corporation and change the name of the Residential Tenancies Tribunal to the Tenant and Landlord Regulations Office in the Act and in the General Regulation. Mr. Speaker, we have heard that some tenants feel intimidated by reaching out to the Residential Tenancies Tribunal for help, and we are actively working to address their concerns, including a new name that better reflects the assistance that we provide. Mr. Speaker, all of the legislative and regulatory amendments we are proposing today are to be made retroactive to April 1st, 2023. Further amendments may be required as we continue to form the new corporation. Once fully operational, the new corporation will work with all levels of government, community groups, organizations, and the private sector to identify and maximize development opportunities and ensure we provide the necessary support through a housing strategy. Mr. Speaker, to bring long-lasting improvements to the housing market, we need all of our stakeholders to be working together and be part of the solution. We need creative ideas and collaborative efforts to move New Brunswick forward and achieve better results for our residents. New Brunswick is growing, and we need to direct our focus on tangible solutions that will not only help our residents today, but for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I believe that a bolstered housing corporation will give us the focus, resources, and unified approach needed in helping to address New Brunswick's housing challenges. Building vibrant and sustainable communities throughout New Brunswick is one of our government's top priorities, and I look forward to working with colleagues, stakeholders, and our new housing team to deliver results for all of New Brunswick. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.